Today, I'm going to talk about les Fauves. Now, as you know, the French Impressionists broke up their planes of color with quick brush strokes to create the effect of shimmering light, as in this Monet painting called The Impression Sunrise, painted in 1872. So a typical early Monet, I'd say. Straight away, you'll get used to seeing these quick dashes of color to create the effect of the reflection of the sun. And the sun is a very crude little ball in the sky there. And then the sky itself, of course, is just, again, it's quick movement, probably done outside on plein air, this painting. No attempt at any detail at all. The little boat there that takes your attention straight away, well, you can see the reflection doesn't seem really to correspond. He doesn't care about that. It's 2 or 3 brush strokes, one for the whole, one for the reflection, and job done. Then along came Divisionist and pointillist painters who took this technique a stage further. Now this is Signac's The Papal Palace at Avignon, painted in 1900. And this is, well, it's, as far as colour is concerned, it's quite loud, isn't it? And you can see there's a preponderance of blues and lilacs and orange particularly. Now you'll find this morning that orange will play a big part in a lot of the paintings, mainly because I suppose it's a bright colour. It's as simple as that. This is what they're aiming for, brightness. But this is called divisionist painting because, as opposed to the pointillist paintings, which we'll come on to in a minute, or at least one of them, you can see they're little strokes. They're not dots of colour, but they're little strokes of colour, little dashes of colour. The whole painting is made up of little dashes of colour, even where the foliage is. The green here, he's got sort of sap green mixed with lemon yellow, and then the river again. And the idea is to give a sort of shimmering water, really. Now, whether you think that works or not is another point. And then we got but that is divisionist anyway, and we'll see a lot more of that soon. Then we come to the pointillist paintings of Seurat, and I'm sure you're all well aware and acquainted with the Sunday Afternoon at La Grande Joute. It's a huge painting, and this is just a detail of it, so that you can see again the small dots, or shall I say, perhaps not again, but for the first time, the little dots of colour. These are minute dots done with the tip of a brush, and it must be painstaking to produce a painting like this, of course. And whether it's successful or not is for you to judge, the individual to judge or not. But it's a very definite style, of course, pointillist painting. These artists place single dots of complementary colours directly onto the canvas. Van Gogh used a similar technique, but with broader brushstrokes. This painting is the Red Vineyard at Arles, painted in 1888. And again, it's a very loud, coloured painting, violent strokes, clashes of colour, a lot of orange, a lot of reds. And we'll come on to the question of complementary colours in a moment. And then, as you can see, the slightly smaller strokes here to create the illusion of water shimmering in the sunlight there. And Van Gogh being Van Gogh, he's sort of made these radiation strokes around the sun, and then much heavier, larger strokes here for the sky, which he decided wants to be green at that point. So they're not bothered about realistic representation, it's the colour. But this is Van Gogh, and it's not a million miles from Fauvist painting, as you can probably see. We're now into the post-impressionist era, where Cézanne would eventually dominate, although I'm not going to touch on Cézanne today. So now we come to the first of the Fauve painters, Matisse. And he also used the divisionist technique, but like Van Gogh, he used strong strokes. This painting is called Les Toits de Collier, painted in 1905. And again, very vivid colors contrasting with each other, a lot of reds and oranges and yellows and pinks and lilacs. It almost used the entire spectrum of colors, or you would say. And then the roofs here done just with very quick brush strokes. I mean, you'd have to be very, very confident artist just to produce a roof with one brush stroke, but that's what he did. And it's a work of Matisse, along with Derain and Maurice de Vlaminck, that we'll be looking at this morning. Now, these three were the main exponents of what is called Fauvism. They were Fauves for a brief time. Fauves means wild beast, although more accurately, we should say it's the paintings that were the wild beasts, not the painters. So it's the paintings are the Fauves. And of course, the movement is called Fauvism. And the movement only lasted a very few years, roughly from 1905 to 1910. So it wasn't much more than a 5-year stretch or period, despite its extraordinary influence. And within that time, they held 3 exhibitions. But the point is that Fauvism was a huge influence on what was to follow in the 20th century. It opened the door for Cubism, Expressionism, Abstract Expressionism, Dada, Art Nouveau. You can name what movement you like, and you'll find the seeds of it within Fauvism. So where did the name come from? At the 1905 Salon d'Automne, the Autumn Salon, where their work first caught the public eye, the critic Louis Vaucel disparagingly labelled these paintings wild beasts, Fauves, thus giving the movement its name, because of their violent use of colour for its own sake, with little regard for accurate representation. He actually commented on a Donatello sculpture surrounded by these paintings as Donatello chez les Fauves, Donatello among the wild beasts. And his comment was picked up by the papers the next day, particularly the Gil Blas, and the term Fauvism very quickly passed into popular parlance. In fact, strictly speaking, the seeds of Fauvism were sown probably in 1904 by Matisse and Derain. They painted together in Collier using complementary colours applied in flat, vigorous strokes. This is Derain's Le Fer de Collier, the lighthouse at Collier. And as you can see, very bright again, extensive use of yellow and oranges. Absolutely no attempt to accurately represent what he was painting, and this was what he was painting. There you are. Obviously, that's a modern version of it now, but you certainly get the idea of it wouldn't have changed a great deal at the time, in that 100 years, I wouldn't have thought. Oh, sorry, gone too soon there. Right, we'll go back to it again. So why? Oh yes, I'd say something about complementary colours, wasn't I? That's right. So what are complementary colours? Well, it's all bound up with colour theory, and I don't want to get too involved in colour theory at the moment. But suffice it to say for now, as a simple rule of thumb, complementary colours can be primary colours juxtaposed and therefore contrasted with mixed or secondary colours. The secondary colour would be created by mixing 2 primary colours. So if we have a look at the colour wheel, I think that's quite clear what's going on there. So the primary blue would be the primary, and the secondary would be orange, which is a colour that you can mix obviously with yellow and brown. And you've got yellow there as the primary colour, and then you can mix that. You can mix purple from red and blue to create the secondary colour. And then they like to clash red with green. And it was generally considered that the complementary colour to yellow is purple, as I've just said. So complementary colours might also be blue against orange or red in the company of green, for instance. So why, back to the lighthouse. So why were they so interested in complementary colours? Because the theory was that when you place two complementary colours next to each other, both colours appeared brighter to attract the eye. So now we can see, before I move on to the next painting, let's just have a look what's going on in here. So we've got greens, greens and reds. We got yellow and not too much purple in there, but there is purple there, and blue and orange particularly work well together, I think. The salt ultramarine, ultramarine blue, I would think that is, against the yellow there. So the yellow, there's no question that the yellow is outstanding. It stands out in the sense of it stands out. And again, as I said, no attempt at accurate representation, as we've seen, just big, bold strokes of colour, impasto in places. If you see this yellow just round here, it's put on very heavily and as well there too. Now, if we come to Matisse's La Danse, painted in 1909, which was towards the end of the movement, we can see here that you've got these orangey red figures against a blue background. So orange against blue, blue being the primary colour, orange, this orangey red, is the mixed colour. And the idea is that they're outstanding because they're against the blue background. And this is a sort of greeny blue, or very pale turquoise, maybe you could say, but it's not so obvious as that, as the blue, the background blue there. Now then, it's for you to decide whether you think that works. Are they particularly outstanding, these figures, the colours of these figures, against this blue here, this darker blue, this richer blue, or against this pale greeny blue? It's more green than blue. And I won't venture an opinion on that. Of course, apart from the colour, which they were particularly interested in, there's also wonderful movement in this painting. I mean, they're all linked apart from just here. This is the sort of Michelangelo Hand of God, Sistine Chapel moment, isn't it, where the hands just don't quite touch. But of course, against the background of the leg there, there is a circle of flesh all the way around, with this figure on the side. So it is an outstanding, whatever way you look at it, it is an outstanding picture. Whether you like it or not, of course, is something quite different. I don't think there's much point in giving the dates of these paintings, because they were all painted, as I said, between 1904 to 1910, and none of them were large canvases. So I'm not going to bother you with those sort of details this time. On the other hand, both Derain and Vlaminck embraced Van Gogh and Gauguin's use of primary colours, as in this Gauguin painting, Cat Toru Potii, and they often applied them straight from the tube. Now, as you can see, primary colours, well, it's predominantly primary colours, isn't it? It's huge blue trunk of a tree where you might think it should be white or brown or green, but that's a huge, I've never seen a tree that colour. And the yellow grass there, and then you've got the reds quite outstanding there. And then also the reds, yellows and oranges of this Vlaminck painting. This is called the Restaurant de la Machine Bougival, painted in 1905. And again, predominantly oranges and reds, but oranges against blue. You've got the complementary colours there, and yellows, not so obviously against purples, but these are more blues and purples, I would say. So it's not painting by numbers, but the overall effect is this idea of using bright, strongly applied color in a painting with no attempt at all at accurate representation. I mean, look at the way the building is painted there, with the shutters, just quick brush strokes, blah 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 blah. There we are. And even the sign restaurant, he's just taken 2 or 3 seconds to paint that on there, you would imagine. But the whole impression, of course, is it's bright, it's colourful, it's lively, it's in your face, and this is what they were aiming for. This one, Derain's Mountains at Collier, painted in 1905, a little quieter, this one. He's still using the primary colours and a lack of concern for scenic realism, of course. And he's still using the quick strokes to create the foliage of the trees, and then more languid strokes for the background. But he's got blue against red there, and yellows and greens in the back there, and yellows and greens here. So this is more subdued painting, but again, just splashes of colour to give the movement of the hill. Not that the hill's going to move very far, but to give the idea of the sweep of the hill would be a better way of putting it. And there's a lot of bare canvas there as well, as you can see, a lot of bare canvas. Or at least he would have painted probably the canvas white to start with, and so that the overall effect would be of bright colours. So the idea was to create this intense colour, this panorama of colour, and this is what so shocked the October Salon of 1905. But now let's come on to the painters themselves. This is a portrait, this is a photograph, I should say, of Henri Matisse at work in his studio. Matisse was born in Picardy, the eldest son of a prosperous grain merchant. You notice probably over the last year of these talks, a lot of these artists, and it might be said of other musicians and people in the world of arts, they came from well-to-do families, and these well-to-do families, of course, gave them the chance to express themselves in their art forms, rather than have to go and earn a living. And it's a pattern we see constantly. In 1887, he went to Paris to study law. He first started to paint in 1889, 2 years later, when his mother brought him art supplies during a period of convalescence following a bout of appendicitis. In 1891, he studied art in the Académie Julian, painting in a traditional style. At that time, he took his inspiration from artists like Poussin and Watteau, as well as contemporary painters such as Manet. But in 1896, Matisse's style radically changed when he first encountered the work of Van Gogh. He abandoned his subdued palette for bright colours in that year, and he went from this, which was painted in 1896, very much in the Impressionist style, as you can see, but a very successful painting, I would have thought. Especially the silverware. He's created the heavy silverware of this bowl and these plates with just a few colours of Payne's grey and white, I would have said. So in the same year as he produced the dinner table, he also produced this, still life with fruit. Well, there's a marked difference, isn't there, in styles? I mean, it's self-evident. If we just go back again to this one and look at these bowls of fruit there, again done in an impressionist style, so no attempt at realism really, but just give the impression of these various fruits. They're just about recognizable, but look at them here. I mean, they're just a mismatch of color really. We still got the idea of the bowl there and the round orange probably, but it's very difficult to decipher any other fruit that's in that bowl. It's just an excuse for daubs of, not daubs, that's the wrong word to use, but areas of quickly applied color, let's put it that way. And again, he's using the complementary colors. There we got the orange against the blue, probably what makes the orange stand out particularly. Reds and greens and yellows, not too much purple in here. There's some purple in this glass here. But I'm sure, I'll just take you back again to the previous one, because it's, to consider these two are painted in the same year, you could almost say the Fauve movement started here, although it didn't actually. It started a couple of years earlier. In 1898, Matisse met Derain and for a while adopted the divisionist technique after reading an essay on the subject by Paul Signac. We already seen Paul Signac's painting. Matisse held his first solo exhibition in 1904, but with little success. Nonetheless, his fondness for bright and expressive colour became more pronounced after he spent the summer of that year painting in Saint-Tropez. In that year, he painted the most important of his works in the neo-impressionist divisionist style, calm, lux calm et volupté. Now then, it's very clear to see the divisionist style there, as opposed to the pointillist style. These aren't dots, they're little dashes of horizontal colour. It's quite a bright palette, this. There's no strong clashes or contrasts. Calm, lux, calm and volupté, so he's aiming for sensuousness and luxuriousness, if that's such a word. And I think that's quite successful painting. It's quite easy on the eye. We got the blues contrasting with the oranges and reds, and you find that is the biggest, the most used combination, I think, in these Fauve paintings is blue against orange, because there's so much orange being used, and that accentuates you got it here again, down here, blue against orange. And this is beach. I think we got to assume this is beach. This is a picnic on the beach, and his characters are just basically quickly sketched in, but I mean they are convincing. I mean their attitudes, their poses are perfectly convincing, but they're done with a minimum of effort, I think you'd say. He hasn't spent a lot of time over them. Same with the boat, just a few strokes and voila, there is a boat, and the same with the tree maybe. In the following year, he exhibited 5 paintings in the autumn salon, the Salon d'automne, and he sold 2. He showed this one called Open Window. Same style exactly, same quick brush strokes, which he inherited from the Impressionist movement, of course, but very, very vivid as regards colours. The light, of course, is outside there. He's got the boats, and you see the masts, the orange masts, and I use an extensive use of pink in this colour, as you can see. The shutters, the open shutters here, are pink on that side, and then he's given them a red, rather sharp red outline there, and then he's got there's some sort of foliage here. It's suggested by the green. And he's got the 3 pot plants here, we've got to assume, on the window ledge. So that's Matisse's Open Window. And then this painting, he also showed in that salon. This is Woman with a Hat, painted in 1905. This is actually a painting of his wife. I'm not quite sure what she would have made of it, but he actually used his wife and his daughter Marguerite as models quite often. His wife's name was Emily, by the way. This painting was especially singled out at the exhibition. And the comment was made, a pot of paint had been flung in the face of the public. This was said by art critique Camille Mauclair. And yes, there is an element of paint being thrown at the canvas, I think. I think we'd all agree with that. Although he's certainly got an expression there, and I would imagine it's a fair representation of how she'd be recognizable probably from that. I think we'd say that. I dare say no. And then of course the hat is sumptuous, isn't it? And quite subdued colours really. The hat, you think he'd have gone overboard a bit more with the colours there, but of course it contrasts heavily against this very thinly painted background here. And then look at these the orange and yellows here of the neck. Surprising combination there. And then she's obviously wearing something fairly green, and even that is there's either a hidden arm to the chair she's sitting in, or that could be a parasol or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, Gertrude Stein liked it, as did many others, and she liked it so much she bought it. Matisse was instantly recognized as the leader of the Fauves. In 1907, Apollinaire said, "We are not here in the presence of an extravagant or an extremist undertaking. Matisse's art is eminently reasonable." Well, there's something lost in the translation there, I think, because I don't think we would call his art reasonable, would we? Or anybody's art reasonable, I don't think. It's totally the wrong word. But anyway, obviously it made sense to Apollinaire. But Matisse's work continued to meet with strong resistance. In 1907, he painted Nude Bleu, and this painting was actually burnt in effigy in 1913, only 6 years later, in Chicago, while it was touring the States. Nonetheless, it had a telling influence on Braque and Picasso, and I think you can see the influence on Picasso there, particularly I'm thinking of Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, and no more accentuated by the way he used this dark blue color as an outline. So everywhere you look, there's an outline to these limbs, and of course it makes the color, the flesh color, stand out, obviously. And you've got this dark color around the hips there. So the whole thing effect of it is that the flesh stands out, however accurately or inaccurately you think he's got the flesh tones there. And I'm afraid the nipples are just a quick dab of the brush from what I can see of it there. Probably doing him a grave injustice to say that. He might have spent an awful lot of time thinking about them. I don't know, but that is not the impression they give. And then the foliage in the background here are just quick sweeps of there's a fond there, isn't there? Just quick sweeps of the brush. Incidentally, fonds are notoriously difficult to paint. I hate painting fonds. They're really difficult. You never seem to quite get them right. Those don't look too bad. So yeah, so that's Nude Bleu. Many of Matisse's finest works originated between 1906 and 1917, when he was an active member of the artistic community of Montparnasse, though his conservative appearance and bourgeois habits sidelined him somewhat. Here we have a game of boules. This hangs in the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, painted in 1908. And again, we've got these dark lilac, purple colours blues and mixed up there. And they should be clashing with this red really, but then having said that, the skin, the pink of the skin, I mean, it's quite subtle really. You can't, it's not, we'd like it to be very obvious so that it explains what's going on more, but obviously they're not doing that. I mean, this Matisse here is using green to great effect, and if he was using a complementary color, he would be using red. Well, as I said, you've got red there, certainly. That stands out. It's rather crudely painted, I think. I'm not quite sure what it is. It appears to be an article of clothing, but it's almost as though he's painted the model first and then has superimposed this. But that's how he wanted it to look anyway, no matter what we think about it. So the three characters are bent on these bulls that are being thrown at a very, very close distance, I have to say. But then again, he's constrained by the size of the canvas. He's got to get them in. And then this figure here, well, he's curious, isn't he? He almost looks as though he's on the back of the player there, and yet obviously he's sitting back in the grass. But because they're not using shadows or any of the conventional artistic conventions, I should say, we don't. That's lost. So these are flat. They're just flat figures, really, and that's how he wants it. He's not interested in realism. He's interested in color. This one is still life with red carpet, and again reds, yellows, oranges just leap out at you. You've got the blue with the orange and the reddy orange of the covering there. Very dark color in there, but makes the yellow stand out very much. And then just touches of quick color, just to create the effect of some sort of pattern on this rug that's hung up against the wall there. I was curious. I mean, I've seen this painting quite a few times, and it's only now that I've noticed this yellow and black mug. There's so much going on in this painting. So that's still life with red carpet. And then this one, the conversation, quite a different style again, really. I think I'll leave you for a second to take that in. Obviously, there's a window there with a balcony, and then we've got the flower beds and the trees, almost they're like Chagall trees. Those are very simply painted, naively painted, you might say. Some sort of building there, but he's not bothered to say anything about it, really. They're just really planes of color, aren't they? Just triangles and planes of color. And this character here, we got to assume this is an early morning conversation, because he looks to be in his pajamas to me. Either that or he's an escaped convict. I'd rather believe he's in his pajamas and she's in some sort of dressing gown. And then I don't know what goes wrong here. There's something strange here with the chair. It almost feels as though this area needs to be part of the dressing gown. Yeah. Then we come to the L'Atelier Rouge. This was painted in 1911, so a little bit later, and it's quite a large painting as far as these Fauve paintings go, 64 inches by 51. So it's quite large. If you want to see this in the flesh, it's in the MoMA in New York. And this painting actually was voted the fifth most influential work of modern art. So I'll leave that fact with you for a second. The fifth most influential work of modern art. Pale yellow lines create the outlines of Matisse's furniture, creating objects out of the red. If you look very closely, you can see the grandfather clock there is just expressed by these yellow outlines, and the frames there as well, and the frame on the wall there, and then this high-backed chair which looks to be out of perspective to me, but there we are. And then these A-frames here that the sculptures are sitting on, and then again the table here, just suggested by this very thin yellow outline. And in actual fact, they're not lines at all. They're not painted lines at all, these yellow lines. They're created by the absence of red paint. So what Matisse did originally is he painted the entire canvas with a coat of yellow, this yellow. And then he thinly applied the orange red over it, leaving bands of undercolor to serve as the lines of objects. Why did he do that? Well, who knows? But that's what he did. And it was a tricky thing to do, to be honest. I would suggest it's because they're so thin, these lines are. They're very tricky. I don't know why he did it, but something must have, some demon in his head must have persuaded him that we experiment. And anyway, the overall effect, of course, is the orange red, which absolutely dominates this painting. And these are artifacts in his studio, in his garret studio. And as I said, it had a big influence on the art to come in the rest of the 20th century. However, we're not concerned with Matisse's career beyond this point, when the Fauve movement pretty well fizzled out. Neither his sculptures nor his later paper cutout work. We'll save that for another time, maybe. I'll just conclude this section on Matisse by saying that having survived cancer for many years later in life, he died of a heart attack in 1954, aged 84. So let's come on to the second of these Fauve painters. This is André Derain, and what a dashing, dapper figure he cuts there. He was born in 1880, just outside Paris. In 1898, he met Matisse at the Académie Julian, and in 1900, he met and shared a studio with Maurice de Vlaminck, and together they began to paint scenes in the neighborhood. So in a sense, he's the tie, he's the kingpin, he's the tie between the three main exponents of the Fauvist movement. He was slim, elegant, often wearing fancy waistcoats and ties of red and green, and always with a pipe in his mouth, it said, although he hasn't got a pipe in his mouth on that occasion. Derain and Matisse worked together through the summer of 1905 in the Mediterranean village of Collioure, close to the Spanish border, and later that year they displayed their paintings in the famous Salon d'Automne. So this is Derain's drying sales. This is in Moscow, if you wanted to actually see it. I wouldn't myself go to Moscow just to see this painting, but still. So the boats there are quite clearly painted on the quay side. The sails are unfurled so that they're drying. I didn't know that was a practice, but it must have been a thing that you did in those days. I don't know. And you've got the clash of colours again. You've got the blues and reds, of course. Wherever you look at the blues and reds here. The primary colour of the blue and the secondary mixed colour of the orange and reds, mainly oranges, I think. And then these rather larger strokes here. This painting, as I put at the top there, it measures 32 by 39, which is a metre, almost a metre square, really. So these are quite large dashes of colour. And then he's changed from a dark blue there to a light blue to express shadow, I suppose. And then there's a lot of white in the water, so we're getting sunlight reflected on the water. But the overall effect is one of a very colourful painting. A lot of movement going on. That, of course, is created by these quick divisionist dashes of colour. And the characters they're in perspective, but they're just very quickly, crudely drawn. or painted, I should say. I doubt there would be any sort of underdrawing to these paintings. They would just apply paint directly to the canvas. I'm quite sure of that. Also, this one is Les Bateaux dans le Port de Collioure, 1905. Derain, once having seen the next 10 minutes or a quarter of an hour of Derain's paintings, you'll be able to pick him out anywhere, because there's very little variety in his style of painting. We've got these quick, fleeting dashes of colour, particularly on water, very recognisable, and in his foliage as well. Although these are more sweeping strokes here, to create the hills in the background. Whoever saw red hills like that, he doesn't care. It's the colour he wants. And this is beach. This is a boat that's been beached to be worked on, no doubt. But again, whoever saw a beach that colour. And we could say the same about the sea. The sea, of course, is green, as you can see. And green, of course, clashes with red. So whether it makes the beach particularly stand out or the sea particularly stand out, I don't know. But the overall effect, of course, is colour, a very colourful painting. And then we come to La Jetée de l'Estaque, painted in 1906. Same style again, only a little more sparing in his strokes. The jetée, or the quay, you can see is just expressed by one or two orange lines, really. And then you've got the boats here, and you can just about make out the boats because they're the masts, so they must be boats. And you've got this sort of potpourri of masts there, haven't you? And that you can make out a hull there, definitely a hull there, but the rest of the hulls are just dashes of blue colour, really. And quite what's going down on this lower section of the quay, we don't know. And then the background, of course, is just bright colours again, the blues and oranges and mauves there, and Venetian reds maybe. So, yes, in 1906, the art dealer Ambroise Voyard, greatly impressed by what he saw of Derain's work, and I don't know whether you're being impressed at the moment, but anyway, he sent him to London to produce a series of paintings of the city. In fact, Derain painted 30, which presented London in a style never been seen before, the Fauves style, of course, and Voyard bought them all. The art critic T.G. Rosenthal wrote, "Not since Monet has anyone made London seem so fresh and yet remain quintessentially English." Some of his views of the Thames use the pointillist technique of multiple dots. Well, I don't think that's right, actually. He uses the divisionist technique. Although by this time, because the dots have become larger, it is rather more simply the separation of colours. Oh, yes, of course, he goes on to defend himself, called Divisionism. And it's particularly effective in conveying the fragmentation of colour in moving water to light. So now we're going to see some of these London paintings. This is Hungerford Bridge. This is virtually a metre square, or very, very close to it anyway. It's a metre across the top there. There's the bridge there, and painted in this very dark Prussian blue colour, very heavy, and in fact some Payne's grey mixed in with that, or even black maybe. And then to create the effect of the Thames, again we've got these horizontal strokes. This will be the yellow and the orange and the pinks would be to create some sort of reflection, I would imagine. And then we got a reflection here by the heavier blue, a reflection of the uprights of the bridge, and then that's the water. Then without reflection, there is paler blue, and here we've got the bank, and there we've got the beach, and there we've got the houses and the boats all in a row. So again, all he's interested in is colour. Colour, blues against reds, blues against reds and oranges. That's what he's aiming for there. This one is Tower Bridge. You can just see Tower Bridge in the background there, painted a rather thin wash of blue. And the boats, quite outstanding, the hulls of the boats here, and quite a vivid red he's used there. His two characters, his two sailors here, almost cartoon figures really. And then we got this, I quite like this boat here, which is done very, very quickly with 2 or 3 strokes of the paintbrush, I would say, but I think that's quite effective actually. You certainly get the idea of movement across the Thames. And the strokes are heavier here. He's gone for heavier strokes. So is he trying to express the fact that the Thames is in a quieter mode? I don't know. And then we've got this orange-yellow sky in the background. And of course the orange and the blue again to make the bridge stand out more. So that's his idea of Tower Bridge. Then we got Big Ben. Now Big Ben appears to be listing to the left to me. I'm sure you'd agree with that. Done in this very dark Prussian blue, perhaps mixed with some cobalt blue or ultramarine maybe. I don't know what but it's a dark blue whichever way you look at it. And then he's got his sun up there. It's painted very simply, and the light is radiated with using these dashes of color in a radiating to give that impression. And then he picks it up again. He picks up the color of the sun again in the reflections here, and again just dashes of color. Actually, I've tried to paint a couple in the Derain style, and they are fun to paint. There's no doubt about that. They're not, I mean, almost impossible to get his color schemes and to reflect anything like as he managed, but they're not difficult to paint. You haven't got to worry about painting water, which is notoriously difficult to paint anyway. You just use dashes of green and blue here, and dashes to get the reflection, just dashes of this same blue, dark blue color that he's used there. And then his boat is going by. Well, of course, this is in the early part of this is the fin de siècle time, 1905, something like that, early part of the 20th century. So I don't think we'd ever see a boat like that on the Thames these days. This is the Victoria Embankment, rather thinly painted, I think. All the colours are fairly thin, so he's not aiming quite so much to shock us or to surprise us with his colour. It's rather subdued painting. It'd be difficult to recognise that bend. I don't know London well enough to recognise it. Is that the obelisk? Possibly. Is that Hungerford or Westminster Bridge or Blackfriars Bridge? I don't know. It's not easy to recognise any buildings by the shapes. And the trees he's made the trees red, of course, and green and red, as we know by now. They are complementary colours. And I think he's created the idea of movement, certainly, with going around this corner. They almost look as though they're going around at an unrealistic speed, really. I'm sure they were moving far more sedately than that. It's quite an interesting perspective as well, because he's looking down on these characters here. And then his Thames, his yellow, is lemon yellow, really. Which is quite startling. I'm not quite sure it works for me anyway. This is Regent Street. Slightly different style, I think. More reminiscent of Cézanne, really, the way he's used these blocks of colour. I mean, he just blocks of colour to create a omnibus. That's all I can assume that is an omnibus, because we got the characters in the top there, on the top of it, and then we got a vehicle going that way. We've got the omnibus going that way. We've got another vehicle coming this way with the 3 horses, and again painted very quickly, without any attempt at detail whatsoever. So if you can't paint a horse, well, you get away with it using the Fauve style, wouldn't you? And then the kind of chap here advertising something with his borders. So the whole idea of the painting is of a lot of hustling and bustling and very busy street, Regent Street. There's not, we know it's Regent Street anyway because of this this bend. He's just suggested right in the background here that a crescent of huge Georgian buildings, of course. So he has at least attempted that. I quite like this couple here. Actually, I think he's got I don't quite know what he's doing, but he's got a strange attitude the way he's been posed there, and he seems to have his arm tucked into hers rather than hers tucked into his. I quite like those reds actually, and those reds they match these orange. Well, it's orange red, I should say, matches these orange reds there. So the colours are picked up. The orange colours picked up at various places throughout this painting, and it's acting as a sort of cement really, or mortar. It's even in the shop sign there as well. This is rather a quieter painting, Waterloo Bridge. Same style again. The sun cascading down, huge strokes of yellow and yellow ochres, I suppose, and light yellow there, and then they introduced some pinks here, and then they're disappearing into greens, and then again he likes to paint his London buildings in dark blues, or in the distance, lighter blue in the distance, but his bridges and Big Ben and they're all in this dark blue color. I don't know why that is. And then again the Thames is just expressed by these quick dashes of color. I know I'm repeating myself over and over again, and it's now must be becoming self-evident to you. I hardly need to say anything, just show you the paintings really, but so you can work it out for yourselves. There's a tugboat coming down there, just about 4 or 5 strokes of the brush produced that, I would have thought. At least that's the impression you get. Possibly not. A bit simplistic of me to say that, no doubt. And this is London Bridge. This is slightly more interesting painting from my point of view. There's more planes of colour in this one, I think. But blocks of colour on the bridge. The traffic is expressed by blocks of colour there, a la Cézanne, I would say. This ought to be recognisable, but I'm not sure what building it is. And then the tugboat going along there, and this one coming out under the bridge there, and the eddies of water around the middle stanchion. So yeah, and then the orange and the reds and the sky and the pinks. So that is quite a interesting sky, even if you don't like it. So the overall effect, you've got to stand back from these Divisionist paintings, these Fauves paintings, and just let the colours do their work on you, really. And then almost certainly the one colour will dominate. In this case, pretty well in all Derain's paintings, it's the blues. It's the dark blues and the light blues and the lilac blues. But you've just got to let the colour work on your eyes and then ask yourself, do I like that? Is that pleasant to look at? This one is particularly pleasant to look at for me. I do like this painting particularly. It's a bit more subdued now with regards his dashes of colour. They're larger dashes of colour, but what I particularly like is the green against the red here. Now I think that works very well. This red hull, the red outline of the boat, and the reds again there, they work very well. I think they stand out, even if there's virtually no detail in this boat. So it's hard, apart from the sail there, it's hard to say what is on this boat. There's a character there, of course. But I don't know. There's smoke coming out of this chimney there, and the oars. And it just works for me, and that's all I can say about these paintings, really. But that one particularly, I like looking at. Maybe you don't. Other works completed on his return from London include La Danse. Now he's back to blocks of colour. The divisionist strokes have gone, but it's still a very loud, colour-wise, it's a very loud painting. They seem to be, there's something of Gauguin about this painting, isn't there? Maybe because they appear to be natives, maybe in a jungle setting, and these could be tattoos on this character here. I don't know. And he's got a bird on his arm there. And this, I don't know what this character's doing here, but you'll notice that she's orangey red, and what she's surrounded by, blue, dark blue. So she immediately picks up your eye. And the same with these characters here. They immediately pick up your eye because of the contrasting colours. And there you've got the yellow contrasting with the purple of the foliage there as well. So there's quite a lot going on in this painting, I think. But you might think it's a bit too much. It's like a really sumptuous meal, a little bit too palate, a bit too strong maybe. And then this one is the Baigneuse. This is the last Derain painting we're going to look at this morning. Painted in 1908. It's quite a small painting actually, only 15 by 18. This painting is in Paris. And this seems to presage the various offshoot movements which sprang from Fauvism. I think we can see Picasso here, can't we, taking shape in some of these characters, these figures. I definitely got suggestions of Picasso, I think, early Picasso anyway. Gone are the divisionist strokes now, and these are just plain colours or mixed colours. Still experimenting with colour in a sense, or he probably wouldn't think he's experimented at this stage of his career, but yeah, I think it's quite a successful painting. So Derain began to shift from the brilliant Fauvist palette to more muted tones round about 1910, coming under the influence of Cézanne. He died in the same year as Matisse on the Ile-de-France in 1954, where he was struck by a truck. So a sad ending for a remarkable, and I think you have to say he is remarkable, a remarkable painter. Now we come to the last of the three Fauvist exponents. This is Maurice de Vlaminck. Maurice de Vlaminck was born in Paris. He began painting in his late teens. Sur le Cinq and Man Smoking a Pipe were both painted around 1900. Again, we got very bold, even though he hasn't got into the Fauvist rhythm yet, very strong, bold colours there, and heavy contrast as well. Chiaroscuro, really. Chiaroscuro, I always have a problem with that word. Chiaroscuro colouring, really. I like the fag in her mouth hanging out there, and a huge bosomed woman. So he certainly suggested the sort of woman you might get sitting at a bar. And then this, again, slightly different style, I think. The sharp, heavy dashes of colour, heavily loaded paintbrush. And again, I don't know, there's something Francis Baconish about this face, isn't there? I think. Whether Francis Bacon ever took any credence of it, I don't know. I quite like these reds around here, and as a heavy contrast, very dark, very dark clothing, and he's made no attempt to put a lapel or whatever it is. We don't know what sort of. It's almost like a smock, isn't it? I would say this one's smoking as well. So I'm not sure whether Vlaminck was a smoker, but he Oh no, he's smoking a pipe, isn't he? Of course he is. Pay attention, Humphreys. He's smoking a pipe, yes, with his mouth slightly open. So at about this time, at the age of 23, a chance meeting on a train with André Derain turned his life round. They remained friends all their lives, and in 1902 and 1903, he wrote several erotic novels illustrated by Derain. Vlaminck also played the violin and would paint during the day and earned a living by giving violin lessons in the evening and by performing with bands at night. He, of course, also participated in the controversial 1905 autumn salon with this one, Sous-bois, roughly translated bracken or undergrowth or something like that. So this is Vlaminck's take on Fauvism, not greatly dissimilar, I don't think, to what Matisse and Derain were producing colour-wise, but of course it's hard to you've got planes of colour in the trunk there, but you've got dashes of colour in other places, particularly heavy dashes of colour in this foliage down here. A lot of blues, suggesting some sort of flower, I suppose, and greens. And you've got the contrast again, the complementary colours, contrasting the blues and the oranges, blues, oranges, yellows, purples, if you can find them, and reds and greens, though the idea is to make this, it appears that the idea is to make this painting very busy indeed, and it certainly is that. So he exhibited this painting in the salon, and also this one, Banlieue Landscape. This painting measures about 25 by 32. They're all roughly the same sort of, little less than a metre across, really. I think I'm just going to let you look at that painting because I don't think it needs any explanation. I'm considering what's gone on before it. Not afraid to use a strong red, sort of crimson red, mixed with perhaps Venetian red for his trunks of his trees, and then introduce a bit of white for a bit of texture and shading. It would be interesting to know how these paintings are going down with you at the moment, I must say. This one is called Houses at Chateau. He spent a lot of time living near Chateau, and so obviously paintings derived from that. There's something Van Goghish, if I can use that word, about what's going on here. I think it's the heavy, dark outlines, these dark black or Payne's grey streaks of colour to delineate the figure, and the trees, they're everywhere, aren't they? And then there's a sort of sweeps of colour and heavy impasto. That particular area is heavily impastoed. In fact, everywhere you look, you can see the paint is just fallen off almost fallen off the brush and just been left, and that's it. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And then look at the sky again. It's definitely, you can see images of Van Gogh in that sky, I think, anyway. So in typical Fauve fashion, of course, he's ignoring any sort of details, and his landscapes basically become vehicles through which he can express mood through violent colour and his brushwork, turning the physical world into streaks of colour to gain a sense of motion. This one is the bridge at Chateau. As with Derain, we can see the predominant colour there is blue or purple. And then we've got the reds are accentuated by it. The bridge there is almost indecipherable in the background. You can just about make it out. He's not bothered about that. And then these houses here, they're quite amusing, really. His windows just dots of paint. I'm sure you could all paint those quite easily. It would be difficult to paint a window at that distance anyway, accurately. So it's a get out of jail free card, really. And then these look to be barges or little chalets or something down by the bridge. This one is called the Potato Pickers, and I'm sure you can see Van Gogh again, the influence of Van Gogh again in this painting. These, it's almost as though he's applied he's mixed a pale pink there. He's put it on top of the red that was already there, and then has done the same here, but this time to accentuate it, he's put this black, and it is black, I'm sure, outline, so that it's outstanding, and the black makes everything stand out and gives the expression of furrows. I suppose these are furrows, whereas what's going on here is growth, isn't it? It's the brush strokes are taking you over to the right there, and then on this side here, I suppose we've got well, I'm not quite sure what we've got, because I'm not very experienced in growing potatoes other than in small back garden, as it were. But obviously he's just expressing there the fields. And then look at his sky. Gosh, look at the contrast there. The heavy use of black. Vlaminck was very keen on using black or Payne's grey. He made everything, he liked contrast. And then his characters here, his four characters, the potato pickers themselves, holding centre stage. And this looks like a woman in the background, very heavy, dark outline there. And the white against black makes them outstanding. Strange hats they've got on. And this one, it seems to be actually doing the work. These are coming and going. This one's going, this one's coming maybe. But this one is actually bending. And I'm sure his arms are too long. But we won't worry about that, because I'm sure Vlaminck didn't. This is a more sedate painting, I think, La Seine at Chateau. This owes a bit more to André Derain's style of painting water. So we've got horizontal lines again, but not as vigorously applied as Derain would do. And then we got the boats, we've got the orange and reds against the dark blue again, the contrasting colours, and the orange is here against the blue of the water. I quite like this yellow that the boat is painted in, this hull of this boat. And we got another one coming in here as well, so we got the idea of movement coming out. Very hard to decide what time of day this painting is supposed to represent, almost impossible, I would say. And then the orchard. Gosh, the orchard's on fire. It's difficult to, obviously there's a tree there, but where are the other trees? I don't know. I suppose there's a tree there, but it looks as though it's on fire. I mean, he's just gone mad with his yellows and oranges and reds, and every so often he's put these very dark blues in and paints grey. So that, yeah, there's no figures in there, I don't think. It just looks as though it's on fire to me. It's quite easy to see how this would shock a public who are going to the salon and expecting to see paintings a la Poussin and Watteau and Derain, people like that. This must have been these paintings must have been extraordinary eye-openers. No wonder they shocked the public. However, in 1908, his palette grew more monochromatic, and the predominant influence again became Cézanne, who seemed to dominate the period, the post-Fauves period, if you could put it that way. His later works used clashing bold colour, reverting to the Impressionist style in many cases. His village snow scenes, mainly absent of human content, languished under black or dark Prussian blue clouds, punctuated by heavy strokes of contrasting white paint. Well, I haven't got any to show you now, because we can do Vlaminck another day, maybe. He's a favourite painter of mine, actually. I do like heavy contrast, But he did paint portraits as well. Here's the portrait of a woman, painted in 1905. She's got starey eyes. She's not very happy about something, I don't think. Being painted possibly like that, I dare say. And we got the oranges and the reds again, and it's the same combination again, isn't it, of colours, and the pink colours. And then he also painted the girl at Rameau. I don't know whether you remember the Trek talk I did a month ago. The Rameau figured there with Toulouse-Lautrec. It was a nightclub, and this seems to owe something to Lautrec, I think, if only in the choice of subject matter, I suppose. But it's rather simply painted, I think. I haven't got I don't know how big this painting is. It's difficult actually to find out how big some of these paintings are. They don't always, the information isn't always there. But I suspect it's probably a meter tall by 1.5 meters or something like that. Vlaminck became resentful that Fauvism had been overtaken by Cubism as an art movement, and he blamed Picasso for, quote, dragging French painting into a wretched dead end and state of confusion. Wow, that's quite a statement considering the paintings we've been looking at this morning. I think state of confusion might well be a phrase that could be applied if you wanted to be unkind about Fauvism. Vlaminck died in Rue de Cadelière, west of Paris, in 1958. So all three died within 4 years of each other. And with that painting, Mesdames et Messieurs, I'll just say, voilà les Fauves.